galaxy far, far away. It is another episode of the Legacy of Star Wars podcast brought to you by Phantom Empire. I am your host, Johnny, and it's, well, I sound happy, I sound peppy, but believe me, that's showtime. Because I'm not feeling that at all tonight. You'll notice, obviously, one of us is not present visually, but is still here vocally. Johnny, it's, we're here because we need to be here because we promised you guys another episode, and we just love geeking out about Star Wars even when we're not feeling at 100%. I'm not 100%. Sean's not 100%. So together we're at about 200% of maximum capabilities, but we'll get there. We'll struggle through. We'll carry on. I hope we bring you guys another great episode. Even though we're feeling a little, we'll struggle on. We'll talk Star Wars and we'll just geek out because that's what we do, and that's what Star Wars does for all of us. Obviously, I'm Johnny, the face to my. Wait, hold on. I gotta remember my camera shake here. To my left, that's not present. Sean. Welcome.
Good night, everybody. See you later. No. Man, this is becoming a reoccurring theme. Fucking third time being sick in 6 weeks. I do think this one's just a quick one, but which would be nice. Fingers crossed. Someone knock on wood for me now that I've jinxed that. I'm still excited to talk a little bit of Star Wars. My enthusiasm might not be where it was last week, simply because there's the adrenaline high of the relaunch, and being able to breathe out of all your holes is also good too. But I gotta say, before we introduce Randy, I went back and did this today, and I actually watched it from start to finish, and I gotta say, you guys were very entertaining. That was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you guys being good sports. We don't have an official second matchup yet, but it's coming, and be on the lookout for that.
Like we said, they'll happen, intermittently, sporadically. They're not going to be an every week thing, not even an every other week thing. We'll have them when we have them, probably about once a month, maybe two.
Availability.
Maybe two if we're feeling froggy, but and not the frogs that Grogu eats either.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different kind of frogs. Third face, the only one of us that's at full capacity. Randy.
What can I say? I guess maybe it's the Virginia weather. I have no clue. Of course, Virginia weather here, she's bipolar. Mother Nature doesn't know what she wants to do down here. One day it's 80 degrees, next day it's 40. So that's just kind of it's going to be 80 when it was just like 50 something the other day. So it's ridiculous around here. But what can I say? It's just how it is around here, unfortunately.
Well, I'm sure we're all going to try and, bring our best to this week's episode. If you haven't watched last week's, go back, check that out. Like Sean said, you can check out the trivia match on its own on the Legacy of Star Wars YouTube channel, or you can catch the podcast in full on Phantom Empire, where we talked about Mortis and what we think is coming with Ahsoka, and we deep dived Rogue Squadron and when we did that. And of course, tonight we have another game on tap for you guys that we haven't. Well, if you looked at the thumbnail, you figured it out. But we'll get to that soon enough. And of course, if you're watching us live, please, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, smash the bell, give us a like, and leave a comment to help us beat the Google rhythms that are otherwise oppressing the galaxy. All right, guys, it's HoloNet time. We're going to talk about news in the Star Wars universe, and yeah, it's been a week. There has been some things. Sean, which one are we going to first?
Why don't we start with the why don't we start soft and go to Starkiller? It's a toy, but I mean, it's a toy I'm actually excited about. I can't remember the last time I was excited for like a Star Wars toy purchase.
I mean, the Black Series, it tends to bring it. This one was announced, was it today?
I believe so. Sorry, I'm having issues with my window here, guys, so bear with me.
Yes, it was indeed. It was posted today. We got it from IGN. As Sean works to pull it up here on the screen for you guys so you can see what it is we are looking at. Adding to the, I believe this is the part of the video game series with it, like the video game sub series of the Black series line. It's Starkiller getting his lovely 6-inch figure, obviously attire this time based off of, as you can see it here, as Son has pulled it up. We're gonna have to talk about your Google algorithms, buddy. Those are some interesting ads you got there. As he scrolls through the images here, you can see that this is based off of The Force Unleashed 1 attire for Starkiller. Obviously, if you've listened to us talk Star Wars long enough, for Sean and myself, if you've been around for a very long time, you guys know we have a very intimate relationship with Starkiller. I'm sure you can find it if you dig far enough back in the archives here at Fandom Empire. That you'll probably find us talking about it. So, we're not going to go too intricately into Starkiller and all of our loves of things Starkiller. So, Randy, what's your relationship with Starkiller like?
And he's one of my favorite characters, actually, that I would really, really like to see become canon someday. Just even if it's something, as long as it's something unique and different, and not, obviously we can't have Vader's secret apprentice, but I'd be all for him actually becoming canon.
I think in some form or fashion it would be nice to see him canonized. Obviously there would definitely have to be a lot of changes to his backstory. Because I don't think, as existed in the video games, he is way too OP to actually exist in the Star Wars universe. But I think he's a character that you can tweak and sort of depower a little bit to bring him suitably into canon. Sean, what do you think about this figure?
I'm thinking that Rey and Kylo Ren can literally hand each other lightsabers through thin air to different locations. So I don't know if the OP thing sticks as much when you talk about those two characters specifically. But yeah, maybe not having the ability to pull down an entire Imperial Star Destroyer would be might be a good step in the right direction. I think there's a place for a secret apprentice. I do. But at the end of it, tongue in cheek aside, yeah, he would have to be heavily scaled back. Doesn't mean he can't be super stealthy, a fantastic assassin. In Legends, almost nobody knew of Mara Jade. Very few people did. Vader, Thrawn, Tarkin, the Emperor. That's about it.
Talon, eventually.
Oh, yeah, Talon, eventually, yeah. But by the way, I just finished Dark Force Rising. Oh my god, Mark Thompson's Talon card voice is just wonderful.
All of Mark Thompson voices are just wonderful. Yeah. Let's be honest, except for that Wookiee. Mark does not do a very good Wookiee.
I dig it. At first, I was a little taken back by the appearance, but then you got to remind yourself, when Force Unleashed 1 came out, Sam Witwer looked quite a bit different than he does look right now, right? So, even after that, he did the Force Unleashed 2, and then he went out in Smallville. He also did Being Human, and his
excellent show.
His look changes quite a bit from the time he's Starkiller to the time he's doing some of those other shows. So I'm actually okay with it. I had to go back and be like, is this right? But no, it does line up when you go back and watch the cutscenes from the first game.
I guess the only thing to me that sort of looks funky is the hair. But that's more a nature of video game hair. It never looks good, especially not in that era. It was not something they could do very well. So while it looks, fairly, it looks fairly authentic to the Force Unleashed games, when you're actually looking at, up close pictures of the figure, it looks weird. But I guess if you're a mock collector, that does not bother you one iota, because inside the box, it looks fantastic.
I like it. I was trying to figure out if that's actually him from the second game on the side of the box. Is
that's
that
a good
lightning
question.
Going in the
yeah, the lightning does. The lightning does give off TFU2 vibes.
That'd be an interesting, here you get the first game character, but on the side of the box, we're going to put the second game.
I think doing that would be more of an oopsie from someone in the art department.
Well, yeah, I could see that being the case.
than an intentional decision from them, since they did obviously choose, the look from The Force Unleashed 1 to then put the art, the box art from The Force Unleashed 2 on the side of the box and have nobody notice it until it's far too late down the pipe.
Let me flip the question here quickly to you guys. Johnny, I know I'm sure you haven't bought Star Wars merch in a while, but is this something you would consider? And Randy, is this a must buy for you?
I mean, would I consider it? Absolutely. But that's more from the point of these gaming Black Series figures, values shoot through the roof. So I might actually get this as more of an investment piece than a, than a
Traitor.
forever in my collection piece. Because if I could go back and buy me a few Revan figures when those things first came out,
thankfully have one. That's the one thing I had to get mine off like the I have to say the black market, the cartel, the Hutt cartel. No, I had to get mine off of Kijiji, and
I'm pretty sure that is run by the Hutt cartel. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I can see that. So I didn't have to pay too much for it. I think I paid $50, which I thought was somewhat reasonable. I mean, you look at them in stores now; they're almost $50 after tax Canadian, which is ridiculous.
I mean, that's the sticker price now. I think I see the stickers running at 55. Pre-tax.
It's outrageous, but no, I love that I have Revan. Jaina Solo was another one that I wanted to get, but never did get her, which was a big miss. So, Randy, how about you? Is this going to end up over in House to Randy?
I have a feeling it will. The thing is like obviously what's different here is I think these usually run about 20 to 25 in the U.S. So I totally forgot about the Revan figure. I kind of wish I jumped on that when I had the chance because that would have been an amazing purchase.
The article does have it listed at a $25 MSRP. So, all right, that's it for this one, I guess. Star Killer, he's a maybe in all of our collections. Randy seems more likely than anybody else. So let's move on now to the next one, and that is a variety interview conducted with Sean Levy, of course, of Stranger Things fame, and amongst other things. He did an interview with Variety. Obviously, he talked about more things than just Star Wars, but I think for the purposes of this show, we'll probably just focus on the Star Wars things he had to say. Oh, pardon me. The first one, one of the questions was asked, and it conducted oh boy, English is a hard language to speak sometimes. In an interview conducted last year, Mark Ruffalo said, "You always get the same version of Star Wars each time. Now that you're working on one, how will you do things differently?" I think that's a very, very good question to ask a director in the Star Wars universe, anyone really in the Star Wars universe. He responded, "When Kathleen Kennedy brought me on board to make a Star Wars movie, her central mandate to me was, I want a Sean Levy movie. I want a story and a tone that reflects you and your taste and what you bring to your movies with a Star Wars story." So I felt extremely empowered. We are in early days, unfortunately, because the developmental process was abruptly paused due to the ongoing WGA strike. But I feel very empowered to trust my instincts in the development of this story and movie. I guess since this interview was conducted, obviously the WGA strike has since ended. We're now obviously stuck in the SAG strike. So from out of the frying pan into the fire, I guess. Guys, what's your take on that? To me, I read that and I think, hey, you know who else they said that to? Two guys who got fired 3/4 of the way through their own movie production. What's your thoughts on that one?
Go ahead, Randy.
Well, I feel like if they're smart, they realize the mistakes of doing that sort of thing, and just, I mean, between him, and what Taika Waititi was doing and things like that. If they could just let these guys just let it breathe and let them tell their own story, I think we're gonna see some really cool Star Wars things we've never seen before. And I think that'd be a great thing as long as they allow them to be as creative and as expressive as they can be, as we've seen in the past.
So how much your take on that and the obvious parallels to the Lord and Miller situation we had with Solo?
Nobody will ever be allowed to come into Disney / Lucasfilm and make exactly the movie that they want to make. That's, sorry for the cat, guys. I can't do anything about that. But and it's not me being pessimistic or overly negative. That is me just speaking facts when you look at the fucking shit show that the productions of these movies have been. Like, it's been ugly from The Force Awakens was not, well, actually you could even say that one was ugly. Like, look, Harrison Ford, had his leg crushed.
That was a different kind of ugly, I'd say.
No, for sure, but that was a pretty bad one. Never should have happened. Fucking Millennium Falcon ramp falls on the guy. My God. At that point, he's probably, I could see it if Ford hadn't agreed to kill off Han at that point. At that point, it's like, no, he's dying. Fuck this. I'm done.
That's the universe speaking. We're done.
Yeah. Fuck, why did I do this? 15 million wasn't enough. Rogue One, obviously, Garrett, I like Rogue One a lot more than when I first seen it. From start to finish, it might be the best or second best of the Disney movies. But again, full of controversy. There's almost no making of stuff for that movie because Gareth Edwards got benched and Tony Gilroy was brought in to save the day. The Last Jedi, which is probably the most divisive film, there was relatively no issues whatsoever during the production of that movie.
Maybe there should have been.
Like the biggest issue I remember is Mark Hamill and Rian Johnson not being on the same page. But I just, until someone is allowed to come in and craft a Star Wars movie that does not feel like the movies we've already gotten, I will not believe that someone's going to be allowed to completely express themselves in the way they want to within reason. There's just so much meddling that goes around at Disney and at Lucasfilm, and until they learn to step back, you're not going to get a Christopher Nolan, quality level Star Wars film. I'm not saying from Nolan, but like something unique and out there and a little bit different. And Sean Levy strikes me as a guy that could do that, but I'm not convinced he'll be allowed to do that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dichotomy trying to it's fit a square peg in a circular hole. You can do it, but it's not going to look right. And that's sort of what they've forced everyone to do. I mean, the closest we've come to sort of an authentic sort of, I don't want to say outside the box, but without having to deal with meddling, has been the Favreau-Filoni verse that we've seen unfold on Disney Plus, which I'm thankful for. It's had its own issues, but not the creation of the production, and that's been a good thing, I guess. All right, as the interview continues, there was still a few more Star Wars questions. Could Deadpool 3 be good practice for Star Wars? His answer: the experience that I'm currently having with Marvel on Deadpool is showing me firsthand that it is indeed really possible to feel empowered and personal about making a movie within a universe that is bigger than any one film. My Deadpool movie is turning out to be exactly what Ryan and I hoped when we started off. So I'm going into the development of my Star Wars movie with a similar optimism and faith that my instincts will be allowed to lead the way. I am a Marvel fan. I am a comic fan. I am a Deadpool fan. Deadpool doesn't fit in the MCU if he's not created in the Fox universe first. All right, I'll go out on a limb and say that. So it's lucky that they created that under Fox and are now, Disney is realizing. I don't even want to say Disney is realizing. Disney is sitting there and saying, we're not going to throw out a movie that's going to make us $500 million when a lot of our other movies are failing to get anywhere close to that right now. So we're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. guys, is Deadpool actually a good place to learn Star Wars or how to make a Star Wars film? Like that's I I don't know. That question throws me off. What do
I,
you guys think about it?
I think what he's trying to say is that because of how how much they Disney loves the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how they're how much they're trying to make everything all the continuity and everything like that. They're trying to obviously they're letting him kind of make the Deadpool film the way it needs to be made, so that they're going to make their money back. And so there's like a yes and no, because you have to figure the Marvel Cinematic Universe may not be as under lock and key as Star Wars is in terms of what they're looking for, but in another sense, it still kind of is in a way, because they're trying to make sure everything meshes together properly. And now with the multiverse wide open, obviously they're going to try to do things with Deadpool 3 that probably has never been seen in a Marvel movie that's under Disney. So it's going to be very interesting. But I do think that in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no.
Sean, what about you?
Let me see how I can answer that one fairly. No fucking chance. Like none. Zero. There's just such. We're talking about a franchise, and we'll go to the Matthew Vaughn thing next, but we're talking about a franchise that is scared shitless to go forward with their big characters with new actors playing them, which is just kind of sad in my opinion. It's the thing that frustrates me the most. But like everybody can be recast. I firmly believe that in any movie. It takes time, takes the right fit. But in terms of where excuse me, where we are now with time, like nobody not named Ryan Reynolds is doing that role. Nobody not named Ryan Reynolds is having the input that he has into the screenwriting, into what's going on set, and it's not even close to the same thing. Ryan Reynolds walks, and you don't have Deadpool right now. You just don't. That simple. Your movie is over. And if Ryan Reynolds walks, you bet your ass Hugh Jackman's walking. Because even though I'm sure Hugh Jackman's paycheck for this movie is going to be outrageous, I think people are going to puke when they see how much it more than likely is. There's just no way that it's anywhere close to the same thing. And nor like think about the Deadpool movies. I don't know too much about like the comic origins of the character. I've seen him in some cartoons where he's toned down quite a bit, obviously. I think he was in the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games.
Yeah.
But
his standalone game is phenomenal.
I never actually played that one.
Yeah, I never played it either.
Oh, it's so hilarious. Nolan North does a great job with the character. That game was so fun.
Love Nolan North.
They're two different beasts, and I just don't think when you look at any Deadpool film, and there's only two of them, and what those films do, you will never see that in Star Wars. I will bet the house on it. You will never see breaking the fourth wall or any of that stuff in a Star Wars movie. I'm not saying I don't like it. I really enjoy the two Deadpool movies, and it works for that movie. But I just think they're two vastly different things, and I'm not saying this as a Kathleen Kennedy hater. We're talking about one of the greatest producers ever, period. But there's some control things over there with that company, and
producers do not make great studio runners by nature.
Correct.
Deadpool, I think, is the perfect storm, of things working. Yeah, you have Ryan Reynolds, who has become arguably one of the top 3 actors in Hollywood in the last 15 years or so. You have a character that is beloved by the comic universe because he is that character that breaks the fourth wall. I mean, comic Deadpool knows he's in a comic book. That's one of the things that makes him great, is that he can break the fourth wall. He can interact with the viewer and understands the craziness, and he's just such a lovable character. There's issues of the comic where Deadpool is just a great, a good human being while still being an asshole. There's some prime examples of that out there, but Deadpool is the prime example of the perfect storm. An actor that embodies the character 1000%. Like Sean said, nobody else can play Deadpool. It is Ryan's role for as long as he wants it, and no one should, even think about touching it, within, say, 10 years after the last Deadpool film that Ryan's a part of, in my opinion. Unless it's an animated project, obviously those don't count. You want to animate Deadpool, go for it. But it was the perfect storm. We did have one more Star Wars related thing in that interview. We'll do that real quick, and then we'll move on to the next one. And it was an Adam Driver question. Since you're close to Adam Driver, could your Star Wars movie be a prequel? Whoa. Could your Star Wars movie be a prequel to Episode 7 in which Kylo Ren would be back? He answered, "Your words, not mine. As you know, Adam is a buddy, and I've always been a huge fan of Kylo Ren, but no comment."
Interesting.
Is there smoke here? Is there fire here? What do you think?
Honestly, I think that's just a way to just try to deflect the question. I mean, could it possibly be? Maybe, but until we actually, there's a name for the movie and it's in production and people are cast for it. It's just, it's going, hey, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You'll just have, it's kind of like you'll have to wait and find out sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see smoke and fire here, but that's not out of the possibilities. The era in between, Jedi and The Force Awakens, there's still a lot of stories to be told in that era, and obviously, the Filoni and Favreau verse is filling in a lot of those. Sean, what about you? Do you see smoke and fire here, or is this just sort of a no comment, move on?
I have no inside knowledge on this whatsoever. I haven't heard it on any of the people that do that stuff, or from any of the people that do that stuff either. The impression that I have gotten from Adam Driver is he's very much where Harrison Ford was at the end of Return of the Jedi. Now that doesn't mean dollars can't change things, and that doesn't mean a buddy can't change things, but I don't see them going backwards. It seems like, well, I shouldn't say that. They're intending on going backwards, but no, I think if we see Adam Driver, it'll probably be in the way of a Force ghost is my guess at some point. So some little one-day thing where he gets paid a shit ton of money to show up and has an effective scene in a movie, and then is on his way again, maybe in the Rey movie there. So we'll have to wait and see, but I don't think there's anything to it. I'd love to be wrong. Part of the sequels.
It would definitely be interesting to think. I think there's a chance it's a, sort of in that time period, and that's sort of why he's extra no comment instead of just laughing it off sort of thing. But I don't see this being an Adam Driver story, because that doesn't make sense to me. Not with them having announced the Rey projects afterwards. It makes no sense to come back and do Kylo as well. And obviously, the further and further we get from these sequels, Adam Driver's getting older. He already wasn't very young to start with. He's older than people think he is. And I just don't see it. I don't see him playing younger Kylo. I mean, it's possible we could see him in sort of a cameo, like he is friends with him, so you see him in like a hologram or something. I'd say never say never on that. But before we move on to the last topic of the HoloNet, obviously you pulled it up on screen, talking Star Wars in the chat. If you're here for the live recording, we'll try and, when you guys say things that are worth sharing, but we'll pull it up and we'll, at the very least read it out loud, even if we don't, dive into it. Talking Star Wars talks recasting and their choices for Han, Luke, for the big three. Han, Anthony Ingruber, Luke, Sebastian, I'm assuming Stan, or an unknown actor, and for Leia, Billy Lord or Millie Bobby Brown. Okay. I can see all of those, I guess. But eventually I'm sure we'll do our own sort of dream castings for the big three and for other things, but we're not going to do it tonight. So we'll pocket that, and we'll remember it when we get around to doing that for ourselves. We have one more piece for the HoloNet, and it's shockingly relevant to the episode we have ahead of us. Obviously, you've seen it above my head the entire night, so you can see our topics and what we're talking tonight. So you know that the game this week, as chosen by Randy, is Star Wars Dark Forces. Conveniently enough, we got news on the Star Wars Dark Forces remaster that, honestly, I didn't even know was in production. We today got a release date for said project. I gotta say, the hotly anticipated remaster seems oddly hyped, considering I didn't even know this was a thing in production. And we're Star Wars people? But I digress. It has a release date for PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Series X, and Switch, and that is February 28th, 2024. Obviously, we'll talk more about the history of Dark Forces in the next segment, so we'll leave that part alone. The remaster, it runs in modern gaming systems up to 4K, 120 frame. Man, I can't read tonight. Whoa, words are hard, guys. Performs up to 4K in resolution, 120 frames per second. Obviously not on the Switch, who wishes it could run games that strong or that fast. Mention of upgraded gameplay, high-resolution textures, enhanced lighting and rendering, and support for console gamepads and platform-specific features. No mention of what those are. Obviously, there were some screenshots put out of the project. I don't know if you're going to scroll through them or not. You are. So as Sean just sits here, scroll through these things very quickly. Yeah, there's really, what? Well, as he scrolls through these, we're not so much going to comment on the past of the game, because obviously that's the next segment, but the future of these games. Randy, you chose the game. What do you think of these updated graphics? What's your thoughts on them?
So I actually watched the trailer they put out. That was from, I think, a couple weeks ago, and I like the fact that everything feels smoothed out. They're higher res, which is nice. Doesn't change that, but that's really, to me, that's what all I've seen that's changed, is kind of smoothing some of the cutscenes out, making them look a little more high res. And I'll be curious to see what the updated controls are going to be, because I remember going, this is like playing Doom because of the aiming and whatnot. But still, I think it looks really good for what they're doing. Obviously, it would be kind of neat if they actually went with the full modern remake, kind of like what they're still doing with KOTOR. But I'm all for it. I think this is going to be a lot of fun to get my hands on and play again, just kind of for nostalgia's sake.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, I think when you look at the cutscenes, if you go back and watch, I think the trailer does some of it. It shows you some of what it used to look like versus what it looks like now, and it is a wonderful cleanup job, like to levels that I didn't necessarily think they could do. With how, as much as I liked Dark Forces and found it frustrating too at the same time, it was a very immersive experience. But at the end of the day, it's I think it still looks good, even though it's not a full-blown remake. My question's price tag, though, right? Like, how much are we going to pay for this thing?
I've got to assume it'll probably fall in the 25 range. That's my guess.
I hope so.
But I guess we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, February is not that far away.
Surprisingly.
Sure we will. I'm sure we'll start getting more and more details of that as we go along and get closer to this project. Before we get to the next one, I guess, Dark Forces, February 28th, 2024. Is it a day one?
For me, I'll get it just because of my love of the game and how much I played it when I first got my PlayStation. I played the living hell out of it. It's one of my favorite games from PS1 era.
I it's so hard for me to say day one, right? Because the whole adulting thing, and bills and kids, and you gotta sometimes decide what you're gonna get or what you're not gonna get. But I have no doubt eventually I will get this game. But day one's gonna definitely depend on price tag. If they want $40 or $50 for that thing, it's not happening until it comes down in price.
Yeah, I don't see. For me, I don't see this being a day one. But I guess never say never. All right, guys. That's gonna do it for the HoloNet this week. Obviously, next week we'll have more news for you guys, whatever's going on in and around the Star Wars universe, and we don't specifically know what that's going to be. Obviously, it's now time for this week's Star Wars game of the week, and obviously, as you can see, if you've been looking at the screen that's been above my head all night, if you looked at the thumbnail, or if you inferred my implications in the last segment, you know what we're talking about, and that is Star Wars Dark Forces, a game that released on the PlayStation and early PC back in 1995. I believe was the PC release date, and that early 96 was the PlayStation release date, I believe. Yeah, Star Wars Dark Forces. Now here's where we get into I told you guys off screen and before we started that I had a funny recollection about an hour before we went on, and that is that I do not remember this game at all. And in my mind all week, from the time we made this discussion to the time we picked our games, went sort of through the roulette of each of us making our choices, and Randy chose Dark Forces, my brain told me, oh yeah, you know that game. And my brain said, I know this game. It's Shadows of the Empire. Ever since we discussed this, my brain has said, we are talking about Shadows of the Empire. Every time I think Dark Forces, oh yeah, that's the N64 game. And I'm doing my pre-show prep about an hour ago, right after I finished watching the Dooku episodes of Tales of the Jedi that we will be discussing in the next segment. And I quickly come to realize, oh, I have no idea what this is. I don't remember this game at all. I know Kyle Katarn. I don't even know if I've ever played this game. So I got nothing for this segment because I do not remember it at all. Up to and including the point that looking at the game, my brain still said N64, despite the article in front of me saying that is not true. So brain power for the win. Randy, you chose this game. What do you think? What comes to your mind why did you pick this game?
Well, I picked it because I was thinking about classic games that I played a lot. Obviously, I'm not going to go back to like Atari 2600 when I played like Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and stuff like that on my Atari, or even the JVC Star Wars games that were harder than balls on the NES. But I figured, something that I figured all of us, at least at one point in time, had experienced that, actually birthed one of like my favorite characters from Legends, and Kyle Katarn. And it's just a memorable game because it's basically Doom meets Star Wars. And that's at that time, that's kind of how I looked at it, because I was like, the controls are similar. You get to fire a bunch of different guns. And as I got, and of course, it was told a really cool story that was different and unique, considering, at the time, we didn't know anything about the prequels coming out. So it's not like we were getting a ton of new Star Wars content minus anything the books came out or the video games, where we could just immerse ourselves into the world. And that's kind of one of the big things here was familiar locations, familiar faces that you get to, I mean, how much fun is it to blast a stormtrooper? It's always fun to blast a stormtrooper. But just, I mean, looking back at it now, some of the controls are definitely a little clunky. But hopefully they'll clean that up with the remaster. But yeah, I just remember this game just sucking up a lot of my time, and I just loved it for what it was.
All right, as we throw it to Sean, I'm going to say there's probably about a 70 to 80% chance he's about to come back with some story recounting how I played this game in the mid-90s with him. Entirely possible. However, I have no recollection of it, no memory of it. So if that is what he's about to do, I'll just say, okay, I'm sure it happened because, like you said, it's Doom meets Star Wars. So I'm sure I played it at the time. But I got no memory of it.
You did. You did.
I'm sure that I did.
And
I just don't remember it.
We rented it from Blockbuster, and there were two pretty common consensus. Oh my God, there's a consensus between you, myself, and my dad, who was kind of poking his head in, and you and I couldn't get past like the second level. And my dad started trying it, and he played the first level, and then he played the second level. And I remember he had this freak out going, everything looks the same. Why does everything look the same? How am I supposed to know where I'm going when everything looks the same? I like Dark Forces for what it is. That being said, I'm a lightsaber guy. Like I want to use a lightsaber when I'm playing Star Wars video games. Not to say you can't do the other stuff, but I feel like most people want to use a lightsaber when playing Star Wars games. Also, Kyle Katarn, hell of a facial reconstruction that he got there from this game to the next game, much in the way Obi-Wan did in the Clone Wars there in that episode. Sorry, I had to. But
not cool.
Actually, Zach Arnold messaged me today, and it was like a voice memo, and he's like, Obi-Wan Kenobi, come on. But no,
you weren't there, Zach.
I enjoyed Dark Forces. It's a hard, challenging game, and I have no doubt that when I play it again, it will be no easier than it was to begin with. It's not the type of game that makes it easy for the person to advance. Randy, I know you and I were talking privately, and you brought up like the couple final bosses there. Like, I never got to them, so I don't know, but I did enjoy my Dark Forces I would say playthrough, but the couple of times that I rented it from Blockbuster, despite not being able to get past the second map. What do you remember about like the game in its whole, Randy, and the final bosses?
Well, it definitely was challenging. There's no doubt there. But I liked the fact that just the different weapons you could use, using thermal detonators, which was always cool. But also, the different types of enemies you got to fight that you never seen before, since the game is based around creating the Dark Trooper. And I thought that was really neat, especially since we kind of sort of got a version of the Dark Trooper in The Mandalorian. So it's like, so they did pull that from the game, which I thought was really cool. But the general at the end who actually wore the Dark Trooper armor, good Lord, that boss fight was so annoying because he'd fire rockets and plasma bolts and everything. And you're just, because the controls are so clunky, you're jumping around trying to get, dodge the explosions. And yeah, it was, once you finally actually defeat him, it's just like the most amazing feeling because you really had to work at it to beat him. So plus then you had like enemies, like they had exoskeletons that actually would go inside the Dark Trooper that you had to defeat that could deflect your blaster fire. So you had to use different weapons. So you had to use strategy and understand the strengths and weaknesses of your enemies just so you could actually take them down faster. And it took a long time to get through for me. But at the time I was 18, 19. So I was like, okay, this is awesome Star Wars stuff. I love it. I got to keep going. I just got to keep playing until I beat it. And lo and behold, yeah, I beat it, but it took me a long time.
very brave of them too, by the way, in 1995, early 95, to release a Star Wars game on these new consoles, well, specifically PlayStation, I guess PC. And other than Darth Vader in the cutscenes, you don't know anybody else. Well, sorry, Mon Mothma and a couple of the rebels, but mainly it's new characters. You are a new character, and you're going up against a lot of new characters, including the final boss. So it's a ballsy first game to do.
Oh, absolutely. But given the fact that the game got a sequel, a DLC to the sequel, and then two other games, and now and those games got remastered. Now you're getting a remaster of this. And plus Kyle Katarn ended up being such a big character in Legends, especially when you get up to Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi, because he has his own role to play in those. It's really, it just shows you just how much the game was actually loved and how much the character grew, and people just loved watching that character develop.
Well, maybe one of these days I'll get around to playing it, because after thinking about it for a minute, I've now realized I've had this game in my Steam library for about 10 years now. It was there was a Star Wars Humble Bundle on May the 4th. I'd say probably close to about 10 years ago now at this point. And that was one of the games in it. I didn't buy it for this game, obviously. I bought it for like Battlefront 2, and it had the Coder games in it. And obviously, I bought it mostly because it had a specific game that I love playing and still love playing, Empire at War. But that's a game we'll talk about another time, I guarantee it. And I'll say this, I love Kyle Katarn. He's a great character, and I used to love flying him in the Moldy Crow in X-Wing, miniature tabletop game. Had a ship, had the Moldy Crow in it, and it was an interesting and fun ship to fly if you got the right list for it. And I enjoyed it. But again, no memory of this game at all. All right. That's going to do it for this game segment this week. And it is now time for us to get into what is essentially the meat and potatoes segment of this show, where we break down things and sort of dive into the lore of things and just discuss things in and around the Star Wars universe. No, it has nothing to do with any of that stuff that just popped up. And we are obviously about to discuss the Count Dooku arc of Tales of the Jedi Season 1. It's 3 episodes, roughly about 40 minutes in length total over the course of the 3 episodes. And you learn a lot about the Count and his things. And if I'm being honest, it fucked with my brain knowledge of the timeline because of things that occurred in there that I didn't realize were still sort of how things had occurred. Initial thoughts on the Dooku Tales of the Jedi. We're not going to get down into the weeds and break it down episode by episode. Sort of, we'll stick to the more general thoughts and things of that nature. Randy, you were. I don't think you did. I'm pretty sure Sean picked this, but I'll throw it to you first because you're the healthy one. So, what did you think? What were your takeaways from this Dooku arc in Tales of the Jedi?
Well, first off, I forgot how good they were. I remember watching them and going, "Wow, this is really cool information to learn." But going back and rewatching, it just kind of just like, wow, they're powerful for being small episodes. They're well written, well acted, and they tell the story being told in such a small amount of time. It was just a complete story, and seeing Dooku start from his disillusionment with the Jedi and the Republic, and watching him just slowly fall down into where he finally joins up with Sidious. It was really well done. They definitely picked out very specific events that really kind of pushed him that way, and I thought they really made it so you just felt for him. Like, they did a really good job of making you feel like, wow, this guy's really got a good idea. His frame of mind is actually pretty spot on. And a thing I learned is you can see that, and Filoni did a great job with this. You can see some of those traits in Anakin in the Clone Wars because he learned from Qui-Gon, who learned from Dooku, and then of course Anakin bringing it up in Ahsoka. So they've really put this all together really well.
Sean, what did you take away from this arc?
Well, I think I'm up for more Dooku whenever we can possibly get him. Obviously, there's limitations, for sure. That I don't think. I'm not saying you can't recast him, but like his death has been told. I think there's an opportunity to tell more stories as him being Yoda's Padawan and Qui-Gon again. Like Qui-Gon and Dooku, not so much Yoda, but Qui-Gon and Dooku are really the ones that sort of start uncovering the I don't want to say toxicity, but like the poison in the Jedi Order, and that it's being corrupted, and obviously Dooku ends up corrupting himself in the process. But like you kind of see his points at times during these episodes, and it's like, okay, you've taken an animated show and made sure he's not a mustache twirling villain that doesn't resemble the late great Christopher Lee's performance, and you've made the dialogue have weight. There's so much in these episodes to go off of. One of my favorites is like the fight with Yaddle, right? Like that, I did not think we would get that. We ended up getting that, and like that's emotional. Like it's animated, but that's an emotional moment there.
Mm-hmm.
What were your guys' thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. It was definitely that entire third episode fucked with my knowledge and remembrance of the timeline completely. Because in my mind, again, you know what? If there's one thing you'll learn about me listening to these shows, and if you've been with us for a long time, you know that I'm not a prequel stan. I am the opposite of that. I do not like them. I do not enjoy them. And obviously my knowledge of the timeline therein is probably one of my weakest areas. And this episode brought that to the forefront when through the entirety of that third episode, my brain was going, Dooku was still a Jedi? That's how I spent most of that entire episode, just trying to wrap my head around all of these events. Qui-Gon encountering the Sith on Tatooine, like, wait, when did isn't that the Phantom Menace? Why is Dooku still in the Jedi Order and the Phantom? Hadn't he already fallen at the? And my brain spent half of that episode trying to catch up to the fact that hadn't occurred yet, and I was watching it unfold through the course of this episode. And then the end of the episode, my brain spent, wait, wasn't Yaddle in Attack of the Clones? Like what? So, brain power was spent far too long trying to wrap my head around the timeline in that third episode, but still so much. It was still a phenomenal. I liked that 3-episode arc more than I liked the prequels, period. Not just because it was 40 minutes and easy to digest, but because, hey guys, here's a knock. Here's a little tidbit. The writing was great. I loved it. And the battle with Yaddle was amazing because you saw sort of some of those, I don't want to say parallels, but you sort of saw the fight with Yoda in there as well. So you realize very quickly that species that still does not have a name does have a very specific fighting style that they are very good at. And I would have thought that Dooku might have known better than to deal with them in the way that he did, but I loved it. I enjoyed the fight scene. That whole sequence was great, and there were so many moments where you could still see Dooku wavering on what was the right thing to do, and it brought out so much more in Christopher Lee's performance in Attack of the Clones and in Revenge of the Sith. It just makes it so much better. Learning the motivations of the man makes it so much better, and I loved it. I love the whole arc. Randy, specifically since Sean brought up the battle with Yaddle, or that third episode, where's your brain at on that one?
The third episode in general, I definitely was probably the strongest of the three, especially when it filled in some gaps. That we learned, that Dooku's the one who erased Sifo-Dyas and Camino from the archives, and that he was still, because of everything happening with Qui-Gon, that was part of his reason, that everything they've uncovered, that was part of his reasons. Obviously his fears, kind of what drew Sidious to him. But then, Qui-Gon losing his life, and you're right, we didn't think about Dooku still being part of the Jedi Order, but also thinking about the fact that, you got to figure it was a time jump of about, what, 6-7 years after Phantom Menace, essentially, between that and Attack of the Clones, given Anakin's age, maybe more, but yeah, that duel with Yaddle was really impressive. You got to give credit to Bryce Dallas Howard, who voiced Yaddle, for that she did a really excellent job with that. But she did, it really shows just how powerful she was as a master, but that there's just even some things even a master can't overcome. And when that door dropped on her the first time, I was like, oh God, what a way to go. And then the fact that she survived it, I was like, okay, props to you. I guess that's why you're a master. But the conflict, just everything Dooku went through, they did such a great job of making him a sympathetic character. Mm-hmm. Like, you're going, okay, I see why you did what you did. And just, wow. It was one of those where even though I knew it was going to happen, I still was just like, don't do it. Like, there was that part of me that's just like, don't do it. Don't join the dark side. It's like, wait a second. We already know he's done that. So yeah, hands up, kudos to them for the writing and the acting. Just, I was so sucked into that character.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. When that door fell on Yaddle, and Yaddle sort of had that hero moment raising it up. It sort of had that moment for me. Then when she rolled in, I'm like, oh yeah, roll the other way, Yaddle. What are you doing? Why are you rolling towards the enemy? Roll away from the enemy, because the door is about to fall again. Roll. What do you like? What? Just not a great tactical mind was Yaddle, I guess. But I digress. Those 3 episodes, oh man, there was so much to tell there. We're not gonna get into the weeds, but there was, I don't want to say a sequence, but that whole second episode, to me, I spent the entire episode saying, man, you are an asshole. The entire episode. It did absolutely nothing to make me like Mace Windu even more. If anything, it made me hate him more. And that's something I did not think was possible, because I did not like Mace Windu. I didn't like anything about Mace Windu. I thought he was an asshat through the entirety of the prequel trilogy. And this further proves my point. And it just made me question so much. How is this guy in so much control of the Jedi Council by the time we get to the prequels? Like...
It was a little loud, sorry, but that's me rah-rahing what you're saying.
I wasn't expecting horns there.
Sam Jackson's obviously a great performer, but I don't see how Mace Windu is a likable character at all, and I think he plays a big part in Anakin falling, and honestly, he's a prime example.
He's a big part in Dooku falling.
Yeah, for sure. He's a prime example of what's wrong with the Jedi Order at that point, in my opinion.
He was a stickler for the rules and was unwilling to waver his belief, and that's a definite issue with Windu in general.
There is no part of me that does not believe that Mace Windu's report to the Jedi Council did not paint Dooku as a traitor to get that seat on the council.
Only Sith deal in absolute.
Okay, Mace Windu is a politician. Politicians do not belong on the Jedi Council. But that's an issue for another day. It's just everything about that. I hated Mace Windu so much. Like, when you're right at the beginning there, and Dooku, pulls that old chestnut, your adherence to the rules, I respect it and I hate it. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something to that effect. Your adherence to the rules, both I respect it and I hate it, which made perfect sense, because if there's one thing we come to learn about Dooku and Qui-Gon Jinn is that things aren't black and white in their eyes. And they prove that throughout the course of, the things we know about them. And this is another of those prime examples where Dooku asking questions should be what the Jedi Council is doing. Like, if a Jedi is assassinated, for lack of a better phrasing here, a Jedi is killed, should your question not be, how did this happen? Like, what? Like, should you not want answers to this question of how was this person killed? Because obviously their story was bull ass. Dooku broke that apart in like 30 seconds being in the field. Like, everything about it just made me scream, why are the Jedi not asking these questions? Why is the Council not asking these questions? How did this Jedi master get murdered and we're not asking questions?
And I think that's kind of the whole point. I think that was them showing just how far the council had pretty much fallen in terms of just, okay, we're here we're peacekeepers. That's what we do. We're just here to collect the body and not do anything else. That's pretty much what it was. It was like, we're just going to follow orders. And we're like we've seen, Dooku is definitely not one of those types that's just going to blindly follow orders when he knows something feels off. He trusted his instincts. He trusted the Force. We saw that with Qui-Gon a lot in the prequel trilogy, where he trusted that the will of the Force was Anakin was the chosen one, and as we saw, he really was. But it's just the idea that the council just didn't. The council tried to play it safe. They let their fear of, I guess, for lack of a better term, losing the power they did have, really kind of corrupt them.
It further proved the point of things that, Qui-Gon, or not Qui-Gon, that Dooku had started saying, that, I think there was a line specifically in that second episode, I think it was the second episode, where he says something like, why, like, he questions the blind faith in the Senate. And it's absolutely necessary. Why don't they question the Senate? Like, if you are meant to, I think he says something like, I can't remember exactly what it was. When will the Jedi start seeking, peace and not, believing the words of the Senate as law? Something to that effect. And it just, I don't want to say it blew my mind, but it painted a picture of Dooku in that second and third episode that didn't quite sit well with me heading into the prequels, because I don't know. I feel like there was so much that Dooku, I think Dooku was hurt by the way he died for me. Like, I think his story should have had him, I don't want to say turn back, but to sort of see the error of his plans and of his ways. Like, I don't know. I struggle with it a little bit after watching this, because you sort of, they spent these 3 episodes painting this image of Dooku as someone who doesn't believe in the blind faith of the Senate, who does believe in peace. And I don't know if the Count Dooku in episode 1 of Tales of the Jedi, or of the first episode of I think it was episode 3 or maybe episode 2 of season 1 of Tales of the Jedi, I don't see how he sees the "I am the Senate" speech and doesn't step back and go, wait a goddamn minute. Like, that whole speech is everything that Dooku stood against. And I mean, this might be my sort of, timeline of, being all wonky within the prequels. That for all he might have been dead by that point. But
He
like,
was.
no, okay then. Well, don't I look stupid now? But
It's
like
all
it
good.
just, again, prequels not my area of expertise, but it just at some point he had to figure out. I do not, for 1 second, believe that Dooku was so jaded to not know Palpatine was his master. Like he had to know that the Senator was his master. He's not that jaded. He's not that stupid. Like he had to figure out who was pulling the strings at some point. And I think he was a smart enough character to figure out the end game was for one man to be in power. Like,
I mean, he knew Palpatine was Sidious. It's not that he didn't know, like, not in these episodes, but like he ends up knowing that while he is Tyrannus. It's not like he doesn't know that. But he definitely doesn't know the plan for Anakin.
no, but I mean, just in general, like, as soon as in watching these episodes, I struggle to, and obviously there's a lot of time that passes between these. I struggle with Count Dooku becoming a man who is okay with knowing that the Sith Lord trying to bring balance is a senator who is slowly wheeling and dealing his way into more power. Like he may not have I can't remember when he gave himself, essentially control of the Senate. I feel like Dooku was still alive when that happened. When he granted himself emergency powers and basically took over.
Yeah, it's Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, when
So
Jar Jar gave it to him, yeah.
I find it very hard to believe that at that point Dooku doesn't look back and go, wait a goddamn minute. Everything I'm trying to stop is what you're doing. And I don't know. I struggle with that like he doesn't.
Well, it's Sidious manipulating him. It's using his fears against him and making all these promises to him that obviously Sidious understood what was going to happen in the future versus Dooku not being present in staying present in the moment of the Force. So it's one of those things where Dooku was so wrapped up in what he wanted to do, I think, is that he just didn't even pay attention to all the signs that he was about to be betrayed by Sidious in Revenge of the Sith.
That's possible. It's definitely, I think we can go deeper into this another time. There's definitely a lot of meat on these bones, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But we're I think it's about time we start wrapping this up. Hit the old dusty trails, as it were. Oh, good grief! That was not a very well timed thing. But watch the episodes, listen to what we have to say. We'll talk about it again. Obviously, we'll come back around because the longer we keep these shows on the air, there's gonna be time to come back to it, and we'll come back to it again, I'm sure. But guys, that's gonna do it for tonight. We may have been looking at a picture of Sean the entire night, not the actual person, but that's okay. Randy, you certainly carried a bulk of this one, so big props to you for that. And as always, if you want to follow us on social media, obviously you can find us there at Phantom Empire now, Facebook and X, Twitter, whatever you want to call. I can't do X, guys. It's always Twitter for me. I will henceforth and always call it Twitter. And of course, you can support us on Patreon and get bonus content. Of course, patreon.com/Fandom Empire. And of course, like, comment, subscribe. Do all of those things that help us beat the Google algorithms that keep us on your homepages, in your feeds, and in your noties. So do all of those things. Like, comment, subscribe. Give us the thumbs up. All of those things. Click the bell. Smash the bell. All of that loveliness. And of course, check here. Phantom Empire page. Lots of stuff. Sean, I think you got it's the weekly Halloween, daily Halloween.
Weekly Halloween show with Dean Renner called Tonight in Haddonfield, Monday night.
That's Monday night. And of course, all through the week, keep an eye on shorter content, stuff you can digest at a much faster pace. And of course, head over to the Legacy of Star Wars YouTube page where you can watch the, I don't want to say edited, but the cutout version of the Legacy of Star Wars Trivia League, where, of course, the only match right there is me versus Randy. Oh, God, you're even playing the music. Good Lord, I can't escape that music. I've been trying for 10 years to escape that music. All right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this. And we will, of course, be back here not next Tuesday night because that's Halloween. So we'll be back the week after that. So spend your time next week collecting candies and spending time with your youngins if you got them, or trying to be the spooky guy on the streets scaring children. I mean, if that's your thing, don't get arrested doing it. Don't tell them I told you to do it, but have fun. Hell, I was gonna end it with some weird, be afraid because the boogeyman following you might actually be the boogeyman things, but you loomised me into laugh coughing, and that is a horrible thing to do. So I'm just gonna say this: we'll be back the week after next, right here on the Fandom Empire page for the next episode of the Legacy of Star Wars podcast, brought to you by Fandom Empire. For Randy, for the face of Sean that's not present, and having way too much fun with the sound effect button. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the next episode of Legacy of Star Wars podcast, brought to you by Fandom Empire. For Randy, for Sean, I'm Johnny. We'll see you next time. And may the Force be with you all.